Lucas Davenport, he had everything money could buy. 41 years old, owner of a technology company valued in the billions, magazine covers, speaking engagements, private jets, a mansion overlooking the city. Beside him, his wife, Amelia, a renowned architect, with a picture-perfect smile, the woman he swore he'd loved since college. Emma's arrival should have been the perfect chapter in this story. The long-awaited daughter after years of trying, hormones, consultations, and fears. But weeks after her birth, the dream began to turn into a nightmare. The baby nursed less and less, slept excessively, lost weight without explanation, and no test could find a clear reason for it. In the doctor's office, the doctors spoke of postpartum complications, delicate immune system, reaction to trauma, and Lucas did what he knew how to do: throw money at the problem. Specialists from 3 countries, private nurses, state-of-the-art equipment installed in his daughter's room. Amelia tried to be strong, but as much as he did, she no longer truly slept. She only dozed sitting in the armchair, listening to the beeping of the machines, waiting for any sign of improvement. Meanwhile, someone was circulating through those marble corridors with another intention: to transform Emma's fragility into an opportunity. It was in this context that Clara Alves Clara, 24 years old, Brazilian, arrived at that house as an au pair. On paper, she would be there to help with the baby's routine: changing diapers, preparing bottles, organizing the room, and holding the baby when the parents needed to work. But in practice, she entered right in the middle of a story that was already written to end in tragedy. Right in the interview, the housekeeper made it clear: "The girl is very sick. You only follow the doctor's instructions. No ideas of your own, no questions." Clara nodded. But inside she knew that, with children, blindly obeying is never that simple, especially when the body's signals start screaming. That particular afternoon, Lucas decided to go home early, using the excuse of being more involved in his daughter's routine. But in reality, he was escaping a meeting he could no longer pretend mattered. The silence of the penthouse felt different, heavy, almost dense. From the hallway came a dry thud, like something hitting the floor, followed by a cry he hadn't heard in a long time. It wasn't Emma's weak, dragging whimper. It was a full scream, tearing through the air. He dropped his briefcase and ran. When he opened the door to the baby's room, he wasn't prepared for what he saw. Clara on the floor, holding Emma tightly, her face contorted in panic, and just inches from the crib, a bottle of medicine leaking onto the light-colored carpet. For a second, no one said anything. The heart monitor beeped faster. Emma's cries echoed off the walls decorated with clouds and teddy bears, and Lucas's heart pounded so loudly he almost didn't hear his own voice when he asked, "What's going on here?" Clara looked up, tears in her eyes, the bottle still slippery in her hands. "Mr. Davenport, I think there's something very wrong with your daughter's medication," she said, her voice choked. "I found this, and it wasn't the first time." In that instant, everything Lucas thought he knew about his daughter's mysterious illness began to crack, because sometimes the truth doesn't come from the most expensive doctor, but from the person who decided, "Do not look away." Before we continue, if you are also a parent, or have ever cared for a child, and felt that something didn't add up with what you were told, stay with me until the end. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you hearing this story from? Because what the au pair found in that room didn't just save a baby. It saved an entire family from a planned lie. When Lucas stepped forward, Clara slowly rose from the floor, her arms still trembling from the instinctive force with which she had pulled Emma away from what could have been another accidental dose. The sight of the liquid running down the carpet churned her stomach, because deep down, something screamed that this wasn't a simple mistake. The room smelled faintly of medicine, and the air felt heavy, laden with a truth waiting to be revealed. Lucas knelt beside her, his voice faltering as he whispered, "Tell me everything, from the beginning." Clara hesitated, afraid of the magnitude of the consequences her words might have, but she took a deep breath and held Emma more firmly, feeling the baby's crying gradually subside against her chest. She explained that, since the first week, the timing of the symptoms never matched the prescribed medication, and she began to notice discrepancies in the dosages that didn't match the medical instructions. At first, she thought it was insecurity, cultural differences, or even nervousness from being in a new country. But when Emma's health worsened whenever a specific bottle was used, she realized that the coincidence was no longer a coincidence. Her voice trembled as she admitted that she had been afraid to speak before. A chill ran down Lucas's spine as each detail fell into place like pieces of a puzzle he didn't want to assemble. He remembered the meetings he had prioritized, the nights in hotels, the excuses for work, all sustained by the belief that expensive doctors guaranteed absolute safety. As Clara spoke, he realized he had never truly observed his daughter's routine, only delegating responsibilities as if love could be replaced by money. Guilt tightened in his chest like a knot, and for the first time, he confronted the idea that someone might be manipulating Emma's illness. Clara then recounted the bottle found that morning, hidden behind the diaper boxes, with an altered label that didn't match the prescription. She only noticed because the smell was different, and because Emma reacted immediately, crying loudly. A strong cry that, paradoxically, indicated vitality. This made Clara investigate other bottles in the room, noting times, observing reactions, assembling a silent timeline that no one knew she was building. The bottle knocked over at that moment left no room for doubt. Someone was administering something they shouldn't. Lucas felt the impact of those words like a direct punch to the gut. "Who has access to this room besides you?" he asked, and Clara had to take a deep breath before answering. She mentioned the housekeeper, 2 private nurses, the floor security guard, and even one of Lucas's business partners, who would show up at odd hours saying he needed to check the monitoring system. Each name mentioned seemed to freeze Lucas's blood, because it made it clear that the penthouse he believed to be a safe haven was, in fact, an open corridor for unknown intentions. Nothing there was as protected as he had imagined. Before Lucas could continue, Emma sobbed in Clara's lap, and he reached out, feeling for the first time in weeks his daughter's normal temperature. Not cold, not feverish, just alive. This simple detail awakened in him an instinct that had been buried beneath layers of work and rationality. A father's instinct. He understood that the truth wouldn't come from impeccable medical reports or the polite explanations of hired specialists. The truth was there, in the firm gaze of the au pair who had no ties to his family, but was the only person who truly paid attention. And, in that heavy silence, Lucas made his first clear decision in a long time, to find out who was behind it all, no matter the cost. As Clara gently placed Emma in the crib, Lucas walked to the large window of the room and observed the city below, the lights shining as if the world were in perfect order. But nothing in his life was. His head was spinning, trying to reconcile the image of his business partner entering his daughter's room with the excuse of monitoring. The memory gnawed at him. He had always blindly trusted those around him. Now, every familiar face seemed to hide intentions he had never imagined. Clara approached slowly, still wary of overstepping boundaries, but noticing that Lucas was silently falling apart. She explained that the previous night she had seen the housekeeper leave the room with a bottle that wasn't part of the set prescribed by the doctors. At the time, she found it strange, but preferred to observe before accusing anyone. That's when she realized that Emma only worsened after certain visits, always at times when neither she nor Amelia were present. The coincidences began to repeat themselves, forming a pattern impossible to ignore. Lucas felt his throat tighten. He had always prided himself on building an empire based on control, foresight, and impeccable strategies. But there, inside his own home, he hadn't realized he was surrounded by decisions made by others. He thought of Amelia, exhausted, believing her daughter was facing a rare disease, while the truth might be closer than they both dared admit. The weight of responsibility fell on his shoulders like a block of concrete. He needed to act, and fast, before Emma became a victim of something much bigger. Clara, seeing his inner conflict, revealed something else she had been keeping to herself. Days earlier, while tidying his room, she found a folder with medical notes that didn't match the reports given to his parents. Some pages were missing, and others had visibly altered information. The handwriting wasn't that of any doctor. She kept it because she was afraid it would disappear if she left it in the same place. Now, as she handed the folder to Lucas, her hands trembled, not from fear of what he would think of her, but from the gravity of what that folder represented. As Lucas flipped through the documents, he felt cold sweat trickle down the back of his neck. There were dates, times, modified substances, records that had never been shown to him or Amelia. And there was more. Handwritten notes mentioning parallel meetings, informal tests, and unauthorized changes to Emma's medication. It was as if someone was using his daughter as part of an experiment, and that made him feel a kind of rage he hadn't experienced in years. Something raw, deep, almost primal. He slammed the folder shut, as if he wanted to crush that reality. Clara, noticing the transformation in his face, took a step back. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to contain the storm that was beginning to form inside him. "This won't stay like this," he said in a low, firm, almost somber voice. He knew he would need to confront people within his own company, review contracts, investigate entry and exit records for the penthouse, and face the painful truth that someone would profit greatly from the fall of his empire. And, at that moment, while Emma finally slept peacefully, Lucas understood that the fight for his daughter's life would also be the fight for his own redemption. That same night, after Amelia finally managed to fall asleep from sheer exhaustion, Lucas stood by the bedside, watching his wife's uneven breathing and feeling a crushing weight on his chest. He knew he couldn't tell her anything yet, not until he had concrete proof. The last thing he wanted was to add more fear to the heart of a mother who could barely support her own body from so much worry. Slowly he left the room, closing the door carefully, like someone protecting a secret they didn't yet know how to carry. Upon arriving at the office, he locked the door and turned on his personal laptop, accessing the company's internal systems that he himself had created years before. He had commands and permissions that even his directors didn't know about, silent pathways that allowed him to track internal movements without leaving a trace. Within minutes, he began cross-referencing times, identifying access points, comparing cameras and building entry logs. The further he advanced, the more one name repeatedly surfaced, like a persistent scar: Victor Hale. His right-hand man, partner for over a decade, a man he considered almost a brother. Seeing that made him nauseous. Clara, isolated in the guest room, couldn't sleep. The image of the fallen bottle, Lucas's desperate look, Emma's crying, it all swirled in her mind like a film without pause. She wondered if she should have told someone sooner, if her delay had worsened the situation, if she had failed the baby who, even though not hers, she already felt was a part of herself. She thought of Brazil, of her distant family, and wondered what her mother would say seeing her involved in something so dangerous. But at the same time, she felt a strange courage within her, as if she had been placed in that house for a greater reason. Meanwhile, Lucas continued sifting through files until he found something that made his heart freeze. Hidden financial reports, suspicious transactions, large payments destined for a third-party medical company registered in the name of a straw man. The most frightening thing was that the dates coincided with the beginning of Emma's crises. It was impossible not to see the connection. Someone was using his daughter as a tool to destabilize him, perhaps to bring him down publicly, perhaps to take control of the company. And the worst part, this someone had direct access to his house. Lucas closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and felt the anger burn like liquid fire. In the silent early morning, he discreetly called Clara to his office. She arrived frightened, believing she had done something wrong, but Lucas greeted her with a firm look, a mixture of gratitude and contained despair. He showed her the documents, explained what he had found, and revealed his suspicions about Victor. Upon hearing the name, Clara brought her hand to her mouth. She clearly remembered seeing him near the room days before, at a time when no one from the family was around. The memory took on a completely new weight now. They stood there, the two of them, facing the truth that was approaching like a storm on the horizon. Lucas then made a strategic decision that would change the course of everything. He would act discreetly, without alerting anyone, not even Amelia, until he had irrefutable proof. He would use his own contacts, hire discreet investigators, and track every suspicious step inside and outside the company. He looked at Clara with a seriousness she had never seen in him and said, "From now on, you are my eyes in here. I trust you more than anyone else in this house." Clara swallowed hard, feeling the weight and honor of that responsibility. And there, in that silent early morning, an unlikely alliance was born. Not out of blind loyalty, but out of love for the same child. The following days were filled with constant tension inside the penthouse, as if each step echoed louder than it should. Lucas feigned normalcy in front of the team, while inside he kept a radar on for every suspicious movement. He observed the averted glances, the whispers, the comings and goings at unusual hours. Amelia, still exhausted, noticed nothing, and Lucas clung to the hope of sparing her until the very last second. Meanwhile, Clara remained attentive, noting details, times, and behaviors that could be useful. And with each passing day, Emma surprised everyone. She became more alert, stronger, as if she were finally breathing without the invisible weight that had been making her ill. On a gray morning, as the rain beat irregularly against the windows of the room, the investigator hired by Lucas sent an encrypted message. "I found her. We need to talk in person." Lucas left immediately, without telling anyone, driving alone to an underground parking lot where the meeting had been arranged. The man opened a folder and placed before him a sequence of documents, bank records, statements from former employees, and images from internal cameras. Each piece fit together with cruel precision. Victor had been manipulating the medications to create a condition that would weaken the baby and generate a medical scandal. A scandal that would bring Lucas down publicly and open the way for an internal coup at the company. Lucas's breath hitched. For a moment, he felt as if the world had vanished around him, leaving only the muffled sound of his own heart. Victor had always been ambitious, but he never imagined his friend would be capable of attacking a defenseless child to achieve his corporate goals. The scope of the plan was sordid. Altered reports, bribed doctors, employees instructed not to see, all built step by step, like a silent network of corporate fraud. Lucas slammed the folder shut, feeling something inside him shatter. Not just trust, but an entire illusion about who his allies were. Upon returning home, he found Clara in the hallway, holding Emma in her arms, the baby's cheeks flushed and her eyes shining brighter than ever. That image completely shattered him. He told Clara, in a low voice, everything he had discovered. She put a hand to her chest, shocked, but at the same time relieved to finally understand the gravity of what she had been sensing from the beginning. "So, he didn't want to kill the baby," Clara whispered. "He wanted to make her sick enough to ruin you and take over the empire." Lucas nodded, feeling the brutal weight of those words. "Yes, but he underestimated you. He underestimated Amelia's maternal instinct, and he underestimated our ability to wake up at the right moment." It was at that moment that the investigation ceased to be just about Emma. It became about the entire family. Lucas activated lawyers, contacted trusted directors, isolated documents, blocked accounts, all silently to prevent Victor from realizing the net was closing in. He also installed independent internal monitoring, ensuring that no employee could interfere with his daughter's routine again. Amelia, observing Emma's sudden improvement, began to feel that there was something Lucas wasn't saying, but she trusted him enough to wait. It was as if all the loose threads of that story were finally finding their place. That night, when the house finally fell asleep, Lucas stood before the crib, watching Emma breathe peacefully, as if nothing had happened. He ran his hand through his hair and let the first tear in weeks fall silently, carrying exhaustion, fear, and relief. He understood that power, wealth, and reputation meant nothing in the face of the fragility of such a small being, and that, however shielded he believed himself to be, there would always be gaps that only love, instinct, and courage could fill. There, in that sacred silence, he vowed that he would never again let anyone decide his daughter's life for him. The truth had been revealed, and that family would never again be manipulated. In the end, when everything came to light, Lucas realized that the greatest betrayal never comes from a declared enemy, but from someone who knows your blind spots, your fears, and your limits. Victor didn't just attack a powerful man. He attacked the essence of a family that believed they were living an inviolable dream. And ironically, it was the most unlikely presence, a 24-year-old Brazilian au pair, newly arrived, with no ties to that world of marble and glass, who saw what everyone was conditioned to ignore. The truth, sometimes, is not discovered by those with the most resources, but by those with the most sensitivity. From that day on, Lucas began to see his own life with new eyes. He understood that wealth is not a shield, comfort is not security, and perfect routines do not guarantee that the intentions around you are pure. He discovered that love is not measured by the things you buy, but by the things you protect, especially when no one else believes that anything is wrong. In this process, Clara ceased to be just an employee. She became a fundamental piece in rebuilding the trust of that family, showing that courage is, almost always, a silent act. Amelia, seeing her daughter recover, felt an ancient strength awaken within her, one that had been stifled by fear and sleepless nights. She finally found answers to questions that tormented her soul, but she also found something greater, the certainty that motherhood goes far beyond the biological. It lives in the gesture of those who extend their arms when danger approaches. And Clara, with her simple and instinctive courage, proved this daily. It was as if 3 different worlds had met in that room, united by the same mission: to save Emma. Nothing that happened was erased, and perhaps never will be. But in that home, a new kind of trust was built. A trust born of pain, but blossoming in truth. Lucas was no longer just the businessman who had everything. Now, he was the father who almost lost what mattered most by believing the world around him was infallible. Amelia found her strength again. Clara found her purpose. And Emma, unknowingly, united destinies that would never have crossed if it weren't for her fragility, transformed into light. And if this story teaches us anything, it's that instinct never fails. When something inside you tells you there's a shadow somewhere, don't ignore it. Sometimes, the difference between a tragedy and a miracle is just one person who decides to pay attention. One person who isn't afraid to ask the question everyone else avoids, or to act when no one else does. Because lives, literally, can depend on it. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments where in the world you are watching it from. And before you go, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories like this one. Your support helps these narratives reach even further, and, who knows, help other people see what previously seemed invisible.